All right, so welcome. Today we have Michael from Ride Report. Michael, you're the head of operator products, right? So,
Yeah,
and we're getting you from Portland in Oregon today, right?
yeah.
Um,
Rainy Portland, Oregon.
there we go. So, many folks will be familiar with Ride Report, but super interesting business. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
Yeah, at the high level, Ride Report is a software as a service company that is focused on city governments. And so over the last few years, as you all have noticed, we've had a lot of influx of scooters and bikes populating our city streets. And cities are responding by building mobility programs, shared mobility programs for operators to come into their city and run a scooter share service. And so what Ride Report does is we offer tools for cities to work with these operators by digitizing their regulations and ingesting operator data from scooter and bike share services. And so we work with both sides of the equation there with the cities and the operators to make sure there's one single source of truth for all the data and reporting and analytics that coincide with operating these scooter programs. And so, yeah, we get to sit at a really interesting vantage point at the end of the day between the private world and then the government world, and get to, facilitate some interesting conversations on how do we move mobility forward in our cities. And Ride Report is there with providing the data to help both parties do that in a way that is responsive to citizens' needs, but also to business needs as well.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, right? So Trōv is a business more focused on insurance and risk, but I suppose it's arguable that both of our businesses couldn't exist 5 or 10 years ago in the sense that it was the data that was needed,
Yeah.
right? So the cool thing is all of these fleets, whether it's a micromobility or self-driving cars or whatever it may be, they're connected and the data is flowing and it sort of facilitates our business. But, just before we got on, you and I were talking about this sort of there's a little bit of contentiousness around that data and the sharing of the data. What does that maybe look like from your point? And maybe I would imagine you're a proponent of the data being available. Maybe paint us the vision as well of why it's important that this data is available.
This is a great question. I was reflecting about this a little bit over the last few weeks, because as you said, data sharing is contentious and it depends on the country, cultures, governance systems as well. But at the high level, last 5-10 years, you had the advent of ride hailing in cities, Uber, Lyft, Diddy, other large companies coming in, operating these services. And a lot of times cities didn't feel like they had any insight into how these services were operating on their public right of way. And the way things turned out was most of the time in the United States specifically, regulations were put at the state level where cities didn't have any control. They couldn't ask for data from these companies. And I think they felt a little burned by that. And, as the mobility, innovation continued over the last decade and we get to shared micromobility car sharing, cities realized they need to put themselves in better position to have conversations around data sharing and put in the right permit and regulation language to getting that data. And one of the exciting things about shared micromobility is that it really forced that conversation to happen in the last couple of years, where we've developed as an industry a data standard to share data between private companies and cities. And what that looks like, a more granular level is, as you said, these vehicles are packed with software and intelligence. They're smartphones on wheels, and they sit out on the public right of way, and we get location data, temperature data. Some of these vehicles have cameras on them and all sorts of sensors. Cities are able now to tap into that insight we get from these vehicles to help them understand where are transportation gaps in their system? Where are people riding? Where do people feel safe riding on our city streets? And so it's been really exciting, especially with cities that don't have strong bike programs, where they had no insights into how, you know, a small population of bike commuters get around. And now these bike sharing companies are providing, you know, complete picture into how people are getting around in a non-automo fashion. So, you know, like it's an exciting conversation, but as you said, there's some contention, and rightfully so. There's privacy considerations around this data, and so it needs to be handled in the right way with you know, proper governance and protections put in place. But at the end of the day, like just reflecting back in the last 2 years, like most of these companies would not be sharing data, but you know, today because of the market and the competition, it's like I would, you know, it's almost too much data for cities to handle all at once. And I would say on the scooter and micromobility side, right?
So are
I
you
think,
almost seeing a shift to where, because I know that, you know, the industry is extremely competitive for the scooter folks, particularly trying to get the permits and get access to the cities.
yeah,
And so are you beginning to see that you know, to make their proposal that little bit more compelling, that they're
yeah.
saying, you know what, actually, I'm going to use this as a competitive advantage now. I'm going to say, yeah, of course you can have the data.
Yeah, and I think because the scooter companies realize they're not directly B2C companies, they're really B2G companies. They're competing for these permits. Like Paris, for example, is new program. It's the biggest market in the world by far for shared scooters. They're going from an unlimited amount of operators to picking 3 operators. And you bet a lot of companies are spending a lot of money and time on their application to make them look like as an attractive candidate for the city of Paris, and knowing that Paris has a lot of desires to develop its infrastructure. And so, yeah, operators want to give insights and you think the data as a competitive advantage while presenting themselves to cities.
Yeah. So it's interesting. You almost made me think of the scooters being, this will sound a little bit silly, but like a weather station on wheels, right? Maybe more broader, lots of different sensors on there, but in theory, there's the ability to understand more than just transit and transportation. Is there conversation at all at the government level to talk about, you know, maybe weather? I don't know what other things there are, but you have, you know, temperature and perhaps humidity, and you have, I don't know, you know, is there opportunity beyond just monitoring the mobility and understanding what's happening there?
Yeah, I think in the short term, and most of these this is conceptual, but longer term, I really do think as vehicle engineering and innovation develop, you know, these could be like a sensor network. It's an Internet of Things network at scale that's flexible. You know, these vehicles are all over the city. They're being ridden around to different positions, and you know, like long term, I think there's going to be a lot of cool applications coming out of that. And one example today that I've seen is an operator in Europe actually have a subset of their fleet with pollution sensors on the vehicles, and cities can now see fine-grained pollution data, you know, where they didn't have that before, and flexible and timely as well. So I think, yeah, this gets me really excited about the different applications that we haven't even dreamed out of yet, coming from the data from these vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, I think it illustrates the point, right, of the value. If we can find a way for the data to be shared to work for everybody, then there's so much more potential there. I mean, you know, at Trōv, obviously, we're using the data to right size the insurance, so there's got to be multiple more applications. So, we've been doing a couple of these sessions, and so I think when we look back at these in a couple of months' time, we'll have a different view on the world. But I think it's important to note that we're recording this sort of late April 2020, and while we're in the US, we're sort of, as many other countries are, we're in the middle of a unique situation with COVID. So I'm almost obliged to ask you the question, you know, what has been sort of the impact for your business, and even more broadly, with, you know, without sharing anything proprietary, what you can share about sort of the impact for micromobility and the patterns you guys are seeing here?
Yeah, I think early on we recognized that transportation was going to be affected, you know, at a bare minimum, and Looking back and looking at the data and the trends, we see like a 70-80% decrease across different modes in terms of ridership, and then specifically for micromobility. A lot of companies actually pause service due to government regulations or just lack of demand. Like it costs money to keep these vehicles out on city streets, and so overall, like in the transportation market, we just seen a decrease in demand globally. But throughout this pandemic and crisis, we've seen how operators have adapted to this new reality in different cool and interesting ways. And as I'm sure you're well aware of, is like delivery has been a huge topic and something that has surged in demand, and grocery delivery, food delivery. And I've seen a lot of micromobility operators actually repurpose their fleets to give, either a service to delivery workers or companies, vehicles where they can use those to get around city streets to deliver packages and food and pharmaceuticals to people who still need to live and still need to get their daily supplies. And then other companies, I talked to a company in Europe, and 40% of their fleet is now private rentals for consumers who are using these e-bikes to get exercise.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so a consumer can rent for a week or a month or two at a time, and then use these vehicles, for utility and for exercise to get around a city. And so, there's definitely huge impacts to the whole transportation market, to cities in general. And so right now we're in a conversation period, like, what does this look like? What does this look like when we come out of this pandemic? And a big thing on a lot of our customers' minds is like public transit, that people aren't going to want to ride on public transit, at least not immediately, out of fear of being in a closed container in proximity with other people. And what does that mean? Everyone gets back into their cars and just clog up city streets again? And so it's been interesting to see the different responses and plans to that question coming out. So.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think we've seen probably on our side, our customer profile is probably not as heavily leaning towards micromobility. So, but it's interesting to kind of join the two pictures together. So, for example, car share, we're very involved in car share, and again, we're using the data, so we're seeing real time the usage patterns. We have seen very few of the car share platforms. So this is the notion of renting a car for 15 minutes at a time, for example, up to maybe a month at a time. So they have reduced, but none of them have gone to zero, because people still need to get around. And I think what we're seeing is overall demand right now is probably down as a whole, but there is still, I would guess, probably 50% of demand is still there, but where it's showing up is in different places, meaning public transport less so, unfortunately. Micromobility, particularly around the delivery stuff. And by the way, that was a great learning for us. Something 4 weeks ago we didn't understand on the Trōv side, and we just announced a new delivery insurance program. So if anybody's interested in that, go check it out at our mobility site at trōv.com. But what's interesting is you're seeing different modes of transport get an influx of demand. But let's see if you're comfortable with this question, kind of the crystal ball time as we look forward here. At some point in the future, we're going to get out of this unique situation. Would you care to give us a little bit of a prediction what it means for micromobility? Will it change fundamentally? Will it accelerate things? Will it all revert to sort of the norm? Where do you think we're going to go here?
I'll give my 2 cents. I love the metaphor that we're, as a society and world, that we're in a dark night, but we don't know when like the dawn's coming, when the new morning's coming, and what that will look like when the light comes back out. But the thing I like to first talk about is during this time of the night, it kind of reveals to us as citizens and governments, like, oh, this is like different things that haven't been working well in society, And one of those things and topics I keep coming up, coming up in discussion is around like how people are getting around and, public space allocation. And like Oakland, California, for example, closed 70 plus miles of streets for social distancing and for exercise and helping people who, aren't taking automobiles around to get around a little quicker and safer. And those conversations are happening, in Milan, Italy, and in China, and Korea, and all across the United States. And so I think coming out of this, I am hopeful that cities will, accelerate plans to build more public space for bikes and non-automobile transportation. And at the end of the day, for micromobility operators, their riders need safe spaces to ride, and that's one of the limiting factors in the demand for micromobility is people feeling safe riding and getting from point A to point B. And so what I'm hopeful for, and what I've seen so far, in like using China as a leading indicator, is that bike sharing and scooter sharing has surged over there. And partly due because public transit is down, and other forms of transportation are down as well. But I'm hopeful, and I think micromobility will come back. I don't know to the levels we saw in 2019, and I'm sure in some markets it'll grow. I was riding around downtown Portland yesterday, and people were on shared scooters, and we're still in lockdown right now. But I think what's more important is like that conversation around like holistically looking at our cities and our whole transportation ecosystem. How can we, as a city, adapt and allow these different modes to flourish? And I feel like this whole pandemic has accelerated that conversation even more so than the past, because it has given us time to reflect and look at about what the state of the world looks like. And so I'm hopeful from both the shared micromobility and private micromobility side that we'll see an influx in ridership in the coming months and year as we start to reemerge and get back to our quote unquote normal way of life again.
That's brilliant. I think that's a nice silver lining, nice optimistic way to end our chat. So Michael, thanks from Ride Report. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ian.